let's get the Hornets up here. Their long-term core moving forward, Brandon Miller and LaMelo Ball, the two main guys here, right?
Yep.
They have those guys under contract for an eternity, at least 5 years, if they want them. Mark Williams, big-time center prospect, drafted 15th. They seem pretty happy with him. 2 years, $10 million, then a restricted free agent, and they'll have to figure out a contract for him. Their big decisions kind of this summer are, what do we do with Miles Bridges? What other youth players do we feel like we want to build around those pivot points, right? Because you have one point guard, you have one wing, and you have one big. Who are the players around those teams, around those players, that make the most sense for them as you try and build this core? You currently have a lottery pick that is projected at number 3 overall. So that will play a piece in this as well. You have potential for cap space that is like 12 to 15 million-ish, like something like that. They could be in, I don't know if they can be an over the cap team if they want to, actually. I think that they are like kind of beholden to whatever Bridges kind of decides to do in that way. What do you think the most important part of the Charlotte Hornets offseason is under new ownership, a new front office executive in Jeff Peterson, and a new organizational structure that they're operating within?
I think a lot of people are going to say what they do with Miles Bridges. Like, I don't even know. I don't know what to do with that. So I'm going to go with nailing the draft. I think they have to make another really good draft pick. And we've talked about this draft and, high upsides and blah, all of this different stuff, right? You can still get a good player. So there's going to be guys available that gives you another wing to go there with Brandon Miller. I think we took Reed Shepherd, or I took Reed Shepherd in our most recent mock to play in the backcourt with LaMelo Ball. If you don't keep Bridges around, then maybe that opens up some other things. So to me, the biggest thing is let's add another talented young player to this. And then they don't have the cap space to do what the Rockets did, but can you fill in a couple spots so you're a little more competitive next year, Sam? Can you fill in with some veterans, or if there are trades to be made, not superstars, not guys that need to take the ball away and shots away from LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller, but I don't think they could afford Grayson Allen, but could you fit in Grayson Allen at the 2 next to, in between these guys just to space the floor while a youngster comes around, someone like that. So what veterans, a couple of veterans can you add to the roster that help them continue to grow, help you continue to find out what Brandon Miller is, what Mark Williams is, and then add another quality piece in this draft?
So to me, the most important piece, I agree with you. Where this starts to me is what you do with Bridges.
Yes. Because
so many of those players in that 2024 NBA draft, from Modest Bazelis, Ron Holland, Alex Sarr, Zach Rizashea, Steph Castle, Cody Williams, right? Depending on where you end up in the draft core or the draft order, right?
Yep.
So many of those guys could theoretically have some overlap with Miles Bridges in terms of your building of a core that is sustainable. So the first thing that they have to do is figure out what to do with Miles Bridges.
Yep.
If it's me, I've been very clear. I don't want Miles Bridges on my basketball team.
I'm with you.
I think that the whole situation is entirely gross. I do not think he should really be in the NBA. I am point blank about that. If you start to hear some of the comments out of Charlotte, for instance, Grant Williams recently just said that Miles Bridges is one of the best leaders in the locker room, right? Which that's a whole other conversation that feels concerning to me, but he has a voice there. Clutch is obviously going to try and figure out how to best handle the Miles Bridges situation for him. I really just don't think they should bring him back, but I think we have to operate this offseason preview under 2 constructs, one of which is they bring him back, one of which is that they don't. Let's start with the one where they don't. That's where it kind of opens up like some semi-real space for them, where they can get to like, a fair amount of money, like 15 million or so. Because you have to remember, like, I think they have like 118 on the books right now for the guys they have. Cap is 141, but then you're also going to have a cap hold for the number 3 pick, which is going to be quite high. So, or wherever they pick, right? And that could be the difference of like millions of dollars at the end of the day. If it's number 6 versus number 1, like that's like 4 or 5 million in cap space, right? So let's operate first like they don't bring Bridges back. Actually, I'll ask this first. Does bringing Miles Bridges back, the fact that you know the decision ahead of time on draft night, does that impact what you do on draft night if you're planning to sign Miles Bridges to a long-term extension?
Yeah, I think it does a little bit. I'm probably a little less likely to go, not that you can't ever have too many wings, but if I have Brandon Miller for all of these years, assuming it's a long-term contract with Miles Bridges, then that might change. Do I want to go Risa Shea or Matas Buzelis or Cody Williams, those guys? And I'm probably looking a little more inclined to go to a Reed Shepherd or somebody like that. I also like, if you're going to hitch your wagon to that guy, and I'm with you on this, Sam, but if we're just talking basketball on the court and what the Hornets could do, if they're going to hitch their wagon, like, I don't need another, like, I may not take another high upside guy. Like, if I'm going to do that with Miles Bridges, and he better be really good on the court, and then Brandon Miller and LaMelo Ball. So I think in that world, I just take Reed Shepherd probably, because I think he just kind of slots in really nicely. Working in the world where Bridges is gone, which is the world I like to work in here, I might take a little bit more of a high upside swing there. Like, I'm a little more like, maybe I take Ron Holland in that scenario then, because I want another guy that can really score, and then Matas and all these other guys are definitely not stuck behind 2 starters long term.
So the other factor here is it's going to be a new coach, right? Steve Clifford has said he's stepping down. To me, if I'm the Hornets, I would like to get more of an offensive guy in there maybe than Clifford is. Obviously, you'd like a coach that can do both. But if I'm picking and choosing between offense and defense, I'm probably picking offense for this Hornets team if you're going to continue to build around LaMelo Ball. Because to me, you need to be able to really let him go and like be like an up-tempo point guard, be able to like grab and play on the break, right? I would like to facilitate like a very well-spaced, like really up-tempo scheme. And if I'm doing that, somebody like Ron Holland, I think makes a lot of sense. The other question I have for you is, we're thinking of Brandon Miller at 6'9" as like this big wing who can be a 3-4, right? Do we think that Brandon Miller can play the 2, and then you're open up like kind of across the board? Because Miller like plays a decent amount of the 2 for them as it is. So I kind of am asking that question because I don't know that it matters if Bridges is back on who, like what kind of player you take, because Miller, I think, is this player that, as you can see on the screen, can fire from 3, is really comfortable kind of handling the ball now, playing in ball screens. He'll continue to add to that as well. You have a playmaking point guard in LaMelo Ball as well. To me, like Reed Shepherd would be amazing because he'd facilitate all of this like up-tempo scheme with his hit-ahead ability. And, he'd facilitate the shooting and spacing aspect, right? But like at the same token, if you have a guy that you think you can play as a 2 guard, you can then like go bigger at the 3 and the 4 and then have more like defensive versatility potentially as well around LaMelo, which is something you might need with LaMelo. So there are a lot of different ways they could go about this, I guess is kind of my point.
So like offensively, I think that's fine. Like, I don't have any issues with that. Let's just say like you went LaMelo, Brandon Miller, let's say Matas and Grant Williams, right? Like you maybe you sign a 4-man, or you just keep Grant Williams, you play him at the 4 because he has shot the ball better for the Hornets than he was. He's at 35%, I guess. But anyway, whoever it is, My thing with that is who's taking the primary perimeter defensive matchup, right? Like who is that guy? Does Brandon Miller do some of it? Maybe, but who's chasing Steph Curry around? Who's, those type of guys?
Yeah.
That would be my worry or question in that scenario, I guess, is who's guarding those type of players in that lineup.
So long term, and this is the pick that I really like for them as well, is Steph Castle.
Yeah.
Like, I think Steph Castle would make a lot of sense for them as a guy who like just really understands space, can be able to move without the ball like in a real way, can play as like a secondary ball handler as well. If you want him that way, he can be your backup point guard, maybe long term. I don't think he's a starting point guard. Like, I don't think he can be like that dynamic of a playmaker, but like he might be able to hold some second units as a ball handler, right?
Yeah.
You get another secondary passer, which is something that Miller is still growing into as a player. I think Castle actually makes quite a bit of sense because then you also get that defensive aspect where you have a player who can really, really guard on the perimeter and make life easier for Miller and LaMelo on the defensive end.
I just think then the fourth guy in that lineup has to be a floor spacer. Like that dude has to be a knockdown floor spacer. Because I think long-term Castle may shoot. I don't know that he's ever a high volume guy. I know LaMelo can, I know Miller can, but you have Mark Williams at the 5. And so when you start with a center that doesn't space the floor in the way that Mark Williams doesn't, and he does all the other stuff really well, don't get me wrong, but you have him not spacing the floor. Castle's not going to space the floor, especially early in his career. The other 3 guys have to. So that would be my only thing with that. I'm cool with that. He's so good defensively. Whoever then is the other wing or whatever position it is, that has to be a floor spacer. And maybe you can give up a little bit of defense, right? Because Castle's so good. That guy has to space the floor, though.
I agree. I honestly would really love a situation, and this is where Castle like kind of gets thrown out, where like they could have like 4 spacers around Mark Williams and just like go, right? Like that'd be amazing. And that's, again, like another tick in the box of like Reed Shepherd for them is like a really fun player who could be a dynamic shooter and space the court for those guys. But I think there are like pros and cons to both kind of sides of that equation.
And that's why
another guy that like is really interesting for them. Like if they decide to go with the, cap space angle and try to make it work that way, like DeAnthony Melton would really help.
Sure. Yeah. No, I like that.
Like if they could give DeAnthony Melton like $15 million a year, like if they can find a way to like get that space and give him like 15, and then he really likes to go and play up tempo, but can also guard on the ball in a real way. Like if you're looking at like a smaller guard who can play with LaMelo and, play in between him and Miller and knock down shots and be able to do things like Melton has, made 36 from 3 this year, 39 the year before, 37 the year before, 41 the year before. Like DeAnthony Melton is like a real name for them that I think makes a lot of sense if he hits free agency.
Yeah, because they can't play in the Malik Monk, Grayson Allen range of free agents. Like they're just not going to get there money wise, unless I don't know if there's a mechanism to move. I don't think there's a mechanism to get there. Maybe there is. Maybe you'd have to trade or whatever it is. So no, I like that. And what you just said is another reason why I hesitate every time to pick Ron Holland to go there because of the floor spacing stuff and just some questions. Even though I like transitionally, like what getting out and running and all of that, like that would be a lot of fun with those guys. So
yeah, no, it's an interesting situation. Any other guys here that we want to talk about? Like the Vasilije Micic, run here has been really fun. Like he looks like a good backup point guard for them. Trey Mann, Nick Smith, any of those guys like kind of do anything for you?
Like I can't quit Nick Smith Jr. I was a fan of his coming out of high school. The injuries at Arkansas and it wasn't all great. And I know he has to I wish he would I feel like he plays on a scale of 1 to 10 at 11. And I feel if he would just figure out to play an 8, he would be able to figure some things out. If nothing else, you have a few names there for your backcourt off the bench that I would be okay if they come in next year and like, hey, let's try out Trey Mann for a little while. Let's, Nick Smith Jr., Misich, like let's try these guys out, see what happens. Nick Richards also, I think, has been like solid as a backup big, like not great, not spectacular, but what's his contract? It's very, very, like $5 million. I think that's a real quality contract for a guy that gives you some decent production as a backup big whenever he, Mark Williams is healthy.
Yeah, and like Grant Williams is like a solid, rotation player at the very least that will give them strong minutes, like professional minutes moving forward. Guy that can knock down corner threes, will be tough and physical, knows how to play at a high level, very vocal as well for a team that could probably use like a bit more of a vocal leader. Yeah, I like where the Hornets are heading right now, I think is what I would say. I'm a fan of where the Hornets are heading. Their big choice is just like, do we care about morals or not this summer? Like new ownership, you never know what that's going to look like. We don't really have a great feel for, how, Rick Schnall and Gabe Plotkin are going to feel about having Miles Bridges on this roster in a real way. This is the summer where I feel like they really get to make that call at a high level. And we'll find out what their thought process is, because in order to sign Miles, like you can't do the 1-year deal now. Like I think he will have offers for multi-years out there. Yeah. I would venture that will exist. So this is the year where the investment is going to have to come.